My sister wanted a perfect wedding picture, so she cut me out of the frame. She had no idea I was about to shred her entire future. The phone felt cold against my ear, a stark contrast to the boiling rage and humiliation that was starting to bubble up from the pit of my stomach. My sister, Chloe, was on the other end, her voice a syrupy sweet melody of false concern that did nothing to hide the blade in her words. We were supposed to be having our final bridesmaid check-in call before her big day, just 2 weeks away. I thought we were going to finalize the timeline for hair and makeup. Instead, she was delivering an execution. "I just don't think it's going to work, Sarah," she'd said, after 5 minutes of excruciatingly awkward small talk. "What's not going to work?" I asked, my pen still poised over the notepad where I was about to jot down appointment times. "Did the florist fall through? Is there a problem with the venue?" I was already mentally calculating how I could help, how much of my savings I could pull to fix whatever disaster had struck. That's always been my role, the older sister, the fixer. Chloe let out a little frustrated sigh. "No, nothing like that. The wedding is fine. It's you, Sarah, in the bridesmaid dress." My blood ran cold. The dress. It had been an issue from the start. Chloe had picked out a slinky satin champagne-colored gown that looked stunning on her size 2 friends. On my size 16 frame, it was less than flattering. We'd had it custom ordered in my size, and the seamstress had done her best. But there's only so much you can do with a cut that's designed for a completely different body type. I felt like a sausage stuffed into a silk casing, but I'd smiled and told Chloe I loved it, because making her happy was all that mattered. "What about the dress?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I told you the alterations came out great." "They're fine," she said dismissively. "But Sarah, be honest. You don't fit the aesthetic we're going for." Aesthetic. The word hit me like a physical slap. All my life I'd been the before picture to her after. She was the thin, blonde, popular one. I was the smart, chubby, reliable one. I was the one who helped her with her homework, who loaned her money when she overspent, who held her hair back after she had too much to drink in college. And now, for the event she called the most important day of my life, my very existence was ruining her aesthetic. "Chloe, what are you saying?" I asked, even though I knew. I just needed to hear her say it. I needed to hear the full extent of her cruelty. "I'm saying that maybe it would be for the best if you just came as a guest," she finally blurted out. "I don't want you to feel uncomfortable standing up there with the other girls. And the photos, you know how important the photos are to me. They're forever. I just want everything to be perfect." There it was. Perfect. And I was the imperfection, the blemish on her flawless day. The fat sister who would stand out in her carefully curated wedding album for all the wrong reasons. The lump in my throat was so big I could barely breathe. Tears were stinging my eyes, hot and angry. This was the same sister I had promised a substantial wedding gift. Our parents had helped as much as they could, but Chloe and her fiancé, Mark, wanted a fairy tale wedding that far exceeded their budget. They wanted the historic venue, the top-tier caterer, the famous photographer. I'd worked double shifts and saved aggressively for 2 years to be able to help them. I'd written them a check for $20,000. I hadn't given it to her yet. I was planning on putting it inside her wedding card as a huge, life-changing surprise. She knew I was giving them a generous gift, but she had no idea of the scale. She just knew I was good for it. I was always the reliable one, after all. "So you're kicking me out of your wedding party," I stated, my voice flat, devoid of the emotion that was churning inside me, "because I'm too fat." "Don't say it like that, Sarah," she whined, as if I were the one being unreasonable. "It's not like that. It's about the overall look of the wedding. It's my vision. You can still come. You'll have a great time. You just won't have to stand up at the front, that's all." She was uninviting me from being her maid of honor, a role I had dreamed of playing since we were little girls planning our imaginary weddings with Barbie dolls. All because my body wasn't picture perfect. The hurt was so profound, so deep, it felt like a physical wound. I thought about the check sitting in the top drawer of my desk, her name and marks written on it in my neatest cursive. $20,000, a down payment on a house, a nest egg to start their new life, a gift from her fat sister. "I understand," I said, my voice eerily calm. The storm inside me had suddenly stilled, replaced by a strange, cold clarity. "Oh, good, I knew you would," Chloe chirped, relieved that she had avoided a major confrontation. "You're the best sister ever, Sarah. I'll see you in 2 weeks. We'll have so much fun." I didn't say goodbye. I just pressed the end call button on my phone and let it drop onto the table. For a long moment, I just sat there, the silence of my apartment roaring in my ears. The tears I'd been holding back finally fell, silent tracks of betrayal down my cheeks. My grief began to curdle, hardening into something cold and sharp. I stood up, walked over to my desk, and pulled open the top drawer. There it was, the checkbook. I pulled out the crisp, blue piece of paper I had so lovingly filled out just last night. I stared at the number, $20,000. I thought about Chloe's perfect aesthetic, her perfect photos, her perfect day. She wanted a wedding without me in it, and I was about to make sure she got exactly what she paid for. My hands didn't even shake as I picked up the heavy-duty paper shredder from the corner of my home office. It whirred to life with a hungry growl, and I fed the check into its merciless teeth. The sound of the paper tearing into 1,000 tiny, unrecoverable pieces was the most satisfying thing I had heard all day. It was a funeral dirge for the sister I thought I had, and a battle cry for the woman I was becoming in that very moment. $20,000 gone. Not from my account, but from her future. The money was safe, tucked away, waiting for a purpose that was worthy of the sacrifices I had made to earn it. Chloe's perfect aesthetic was not that purpose. My first instinct was to call my parents, to unleash the torrent of righteous anger and hurt that was threatening to drown me. But I stopped myself. I knew exactly how that would go. My mother, the eternal peacekeeper, would say, "Oh, honey, you know she doesn't mean it. She's just stressed." My father would sigh and tell me to be the bigger person. They had always enabled Chloe's behavior, chalking up her selfishness to her being the baby of the family. They would pressure me to forgive and forget, to smooth things over for the sake of family harmony. But the thing about being the bigger person is that you're always the one who has to shrink yourself to make room for everyone else's comfort. I was done shrinking. Instead of calling them, I sent Chloe a single breezy text message. "No worries at all. Totally understand wanting your day to be perfect. Happy to just relax and celebrate with you as a guest. See you there, XOXO." The XOXO was a touch of pure, unadulterated venom disguised as affection. I knew it would drive her crazy. She was expecting a tearful phone call, a fight, begging, something she could control. My placid acceptance would be a wrench in the gears of her drama machine. Let her wonder. Let her sweat. The next 2 weeks were a blur of polite deflections. My phone buzzed constantly. First, it was the other bridesmaids, a chorus of confused texts. "Hey, Chloe said you're not in the wedding party anymore. Is everything okay?" I gave them all a bland, non-committal response. Decided it was best for me to just enjoy the day as a guest. Can't wait to see you all. Then came the inevitable call from my mother. "Sarah, honey, Chloe told me what happened," she began, her voice dripping with practiced sympathy. "She feels just terrible about it. You know how she gets when she's stressed. She says you took it so well, but she's worried you're secretly upset." "I'm not secretly upset, Mom. I'm fine," I said, my voice as smooth as glass. "Chloe made a decision about her wedding, and I respect that. It's her day. But to kick you out over a dress, she said you seemed so large in it, and it was making you self-conscious." The lie was so audacious, so perfectly Chloe, that I almost laughed. She was painting me as the victim of my own insecurity, and herself as the thoughtful sister trying to spare my feelings. It was brilliant in a twisted, sociopathic way. "Well then, she did me a favor," I replied, keeping my tone light. Now I don't have to worry about a thing. I'm just looking forward to the party." My mother hung up, placated but confused. Chloe's manipulation hadn't worked. The family narrative she was trying to spin wasn't taking hold because I refused to play my part as the tragic fat sister. With the $20,000 no longer earmarked for Chloe's fantasy, a world of possibilities opened up. I paid off the last of my student loans. I booked a 2-week non-refundable trip to Italy for the month after the wedding. And then I turned my attention to the main event. My revenge wouldn't be loud or confrontational. It would be silent, elegant, and utterly devastating. I wasn't going to skip the wedding, I was going to make an entrance. I took a day off work and went shopping. Not at the department stores where I usually tried to find clothes that would flatter my figure, a euphemism for hide my body. I went to a high-end boutique, the kind of place I'd only ever window shopped at. I walked in and was immediately greeted by a stylist who didn't even blink at my size. "I'm going to a black tie optional wedding," I told her. "The color scheme is champagne, blush, and gold. I want to wear a color that is none of those things, and I want to look absolutely incredible." She smiled, a conspiratorial glint in her eye. "I have just the thing." She returned with a dress. It was a deep, jewel-toned emerald green, the color of envy and old money. It was cut from a heavy, liquid-like silk that shimmered under the lights. It wasn't designed to hide or minimize me. It was designed to celebrate every curve. It had a classic, old Hollywood silhouette, with a draped neckline that was elegant and alluring, and a slit up the side that was just high enough to be daring. I stepped into the dressing room, my heart pounding. As I pulled the fabric over my body and zipped it up, I barely recognized the woman staring back at me in the mirror. She was powerful. She was beautiful. She was not the aesthetic. She was the main event. The price tag was astronomical, more than I had ever spent on a single item of clothing in my life. I handed the stylist my credit card without a second thought. This wasn't just a dress. It was armor. The day of the wedding arrived, cloaked in an impossibly perfect blue sky. It was the kind of day Chloe must have ordered directly from a catalog. As I drove to the historic manor she'd chosen for her venue, my phone buzzed with a text from her. "Can't wait to see you. We're all getting ready in the bridal suite. You should have come. So much fun." It was a last-minute jab, a reminder of the inner circle from which I'd been ejected. I smiled, tapping out a reply. "Sounds amazing. Stuck in a bit of traffic, but we'll be there for the ceremony. Break a leg." The winking emoji was my tiny, private declaration of war. I had spent the morning not with a gaggle of bridesmaids, but in quiet, solitary preparation. I went to a top salon and had my hair styled into glamorous, cascading waves that fell over one shoulder. My makeup was professionally done, a smoky eye, a bold red lip, a look that screamed confidence, not quiet compliance. When I finally slipped on the emerald green dress, it felt less like clothing and more like a second skin. Every piece of the ensemble, from the custom-fit dress to the strappy gold heels and the delicate diamond earrings I'd inherited from my grandmother, was a carefully chosen weapon. I timed my arrival perfectly, slipping into a seat in the back row of the outdoor ceremony just as the string quartet began playing the processional. The grounds were breathtaking, with roses climbing the old stone walls and a gentle breeze rustling the leaves. Everything was, as Chloe had demanded, perfect. Her color palette was everywhere. Champagne-colored ribbons on the chairs, blush, rose petals scattered down the aisle, and gold accents on the programs. Then the bridesmaids began their walk. One by one, they floated down the aisle in their slinky, ill-fitting satin gowns. Even on their slender frames, the dresses looked cheap and unforgiving under the bright sunlight, clinging in all the wrong places. I felt a small, vindicated smirk play on my lips. Then came Chloe. I had to admit she was a beautiful bride. Her dress was a cloud of white tulle, and her face, framed by a delicate veil, was radiant. But as she walked down the aisle on my father's arm, her eyes scanned the crowd. I watched as her gaze passed over me, then snapped back, her step faltering for a microsecond. Her perfect bridal smile tightened at the edges. I saw the flicker of confusion, then annoyance, then pure, unadulterated fury in her eyes before she masked it and turned her attention back to her groom, Mark. She had seen me, and she had seen the dress. Victory was a heady, intoxicating feeling. During the ceremony, I felt my mother's eyes on me from the front row. She kept twisting in her seat to shoot me looks that were a mixture of shock and disapproval. I simply smiled serenely back at her, a polite guest enjoying the nuptials. I knew the family tribunal would convene later, but for now, this was my moment. The reception was held in the Manor's grand ballroom. As the guests filtered in to find their seats, I deliberately hung back, waiting for the bride and groom to be announced. My table was in the back near the kitchens, a subtle but clear placement on the social hierarchy of the evening. When the DJ finally announced Mr. and Mrs. Mark and Chloe Collins, the room erupted in applause. Chloe glided in, beaming, but her eyes were already scanning the room for me. I made my move. As she and Mark made their way to the dance floor for their first dance, I began to walk toward the gift table at the front of the room. My path took me directly across the edge of the dance floor, putting me in Chloe's line of sight. I moved with a slow, deliberate confidence I hadn't known I possessed. The emerald silk of my dress swirled around my ankles, catching the light of the chandeliers. I could feel the eyes of the room turning toward me. Guests who knew me did double takes. Guests who didn't simply saw a striking woman in a stunning dress. As I passed the dance floor, Chloe's eyes locked onto mine. She was mid-twirl with Mark, a saccharine love song swelling around them. Her smile was gone, replaced by a look of sheer disbelief and rage. She missed a step, stumbling slightly against her new husband. It was a tiny mistake, one that most people probably missed, but I saw it, and I knew she knew that I saw it. I reached the gift table, placed my tastefully wrapped and significantly less expensive gift on the pile, and then turned to walk back to my seat, my work done. I had officially ruined her aesthetic. The rest of the dinner was a tense affair. I could feel the waves of fury radiating from the head table. Chloe kept whispering furiously to Mark, her mother, and anyone else who would listen, all while shooting daggers in my direction. I ate my dry chicken, sipped my overpriced wine, and chatted pleasantly with the distant cousins seated at my table. I was enjoying myself immensely. Just as the cake was about to be cut, my father approached my table. His face was a thundercloud. He leaned down, his voice a low, angry hiss meant only for me. "What in God's name do you think you're doing, Sarah? You've had your little bit of fun. You made your point. Now it's time for you to leave. Chloe is hysterical." I looked up at him, my expression one of pure innocence. "Leave? Dad, I'm a guest. I was invited. Why would I leave before the cake?" "You know why," he seethed. "You did this on purpose to upset your sister on her wedding day. This is a tantrum, and it ends now. You will go over to that table, apologize to your sister and Mark, and then you will quietly exit through the back." I felt that old, familiar pressure to shrink, to apologize, to make myself smaller to soothe someone else's ego. But the woman in the emerald dress wasn't shrinking for anyone. I placed my napkin on the table and stood up, my 5'9" frame in heels, making me slightly taller than him. I looked him directly in the eye, my voice as cold and clear as ice. "No," I said simply. "I don't think I will. In fact, I believe the best man is about to give his toast. I wouldn't want to miss it." And with that, I turned my back on my stunned father and walked toward the head table, not to apologize, but to get a better view. My father stood there, momentarily speechless, a statue of impotent fury. He was so accustomed to my compliance, to me being the easy, agreeable daughter, that my simple two-letter refusal had short-circuited his brain. I didn't give him time to recover. I glided past him, my emerald dress a silent, shimmering rebuke, and found an empty chair at a table of Mark's college friends, who seemed more interested in the open bar than the family drama. They barely registered my presence, which was perfect. I had a front row seat. The best man, a nervous guy named Kevin, tapped the microphone. "Testing, 1, 2. The feedback screeched and he winced. The room quieted down, and he launched into a series of predictable, slightly awkward jokes about Mark's college days. I watched Chloe, who was forcing a smile so wide and brittle it looked like it might crack her face in two. Her eyes, however, were not on the best man. They were locked on me, blazing with a hatred so pure it was almost impressive. Mark, oblivious, was laughing at Kevin's speech, occasionally patting his new wife's hand. He clearly hadn't been fully briefed on the sartorial crime of the century that had just been committed. After the best man's toast, it was the maid of honor's turn. The new maid of honor, a girl named Jessica, who'd been promoted from bridesmaid, stepped up to the mic. She was one of the size 2 girls swimming in her champagne satin. Her speech was a gushing, vapid tribute to Chloe's beauty, her impeccable taste, and what an amazing friend she was. At one point, she said, "Chloe just has this incredible vision for everything. When she gets an idea in her head of how something should be, she makes it happen. Everything has to be perfect, and as you can see tonight," she gestured around the glittering ballroom, "it is." A few people clapped politely. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my champagne, my eyes meeting Chloe's over the rim of the glass. Her jaw was clenched so tight I was surprised her teeth didn't shatter. The irony was so thick you could have frosted a wedding cake with it. The toast concluded, and the DJ cranked up the music, urging everyone to the dance floor. This was the part of the evening I had been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. I knew I couldn't just sit in the corner all night. That would look like I was sulking. It would give them the satisfaction of thinking they had won, that they had successfully ostracized me. So when one of Mark's tipsy groomsmen asked me to dance, I smiled and accepted. On the dance floor, I was a magnet for whispers. I could feel the questioning glances and hear the snippets of conversation as I twirled past clusters of guests. "Isn't that her sister? Heard there was some drama. God, that dress." I ignored it all, laughing and dancing as if I didn't have a care in the world. I was a living, breathing embodiment of the phrase unbothered, and I knew it was driving Chloe insane. Finally, my mother cornered me near the bar. Her face was a mask of strained disappointment. "Sarah, we need to talk," she said, pulling me toward a secluded alcove. "There's nothing to talk about, Mom," I said, my voice still light and breezy. "Don't you dare take that tone with me," she hissed, her composure finally cracking. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Your sister is in the bridal suite sobbing her eyes out. You've ruined her wedding night." "I'm pretty sure I haven't," I said calmly. "I've been a perfectly polite guest. I've danced, I've mingled, I've eaten the mediocre salmon. What exactly did I do to ruin her night? Wear a dress she didn't approve of? You know it's more than that. You did this to hurt her. It was a selfish, vindictive display, and I am ashamed of you. After everything we've done for you, after Chloe was gracious enough to still want you here at all." That was it. The dam of my composure broke. Gracious? I let out a short, sharp laugh that was devoid of any humor. She was gracious? Mom, she kicked me out of her wedding for being fat. She called me an aesthetic liability. She told me my body was an imperfection on her perfect day, and you want me to thank her for her grace? My mother actually flinched. "She was stressed," she stammered, falling back on the family's favorite excuse. "She didn't mean it like that." "Yes, she did," I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous level. "She meant every single word. And what's worse is that you and Dad have let her get away with this kind of behavior her entire life. You've always protected her, excused her, and told me to be the bigger person. Well, I'm done. I am the bigger person in every sense of the word, and I am done apologizing for it." Tears of frustration welled in my mother's eyes. "Family is supposed to support each other, Sarah, no matter what. Was Chloe supporting me when she humiliated me? Were you supporting me when you called to tell me she felt terrible, but still expected me to just roll over and accept it? No. You only demand support when it flows in Chloe's direction. It's a one-way street and I'm exiting. Just then, an enraged Mark appeared in the alcove. His face was red, his tuxedo jacket askew. He had clearly been drinking. "There you are," he snarled, pointing a finger at my face. "You've got a lot of nerve." "Excuse me?" I asked, arching an eyebrow. "You heard me. You show up here looking like that, deliberately trying to upstage my wife on her wedding day. What is wrong with you?" "Mark, I think you should calm down," my mother said weakly, trying to intervene. He ignored her. "Chloe told me what you did," he continued, his voice getting louder. "She told me how you refused to lose weight for the wedding, how you threw a fit about the dress, and now this stunt. It's pathetic. You're just jealous." The accusation was so ridiculous, so completely fabricated, that I just stared at him. This was the narrative Chloe had spun, a masterpiece of lies and projection. She had painted me as the bitter, jealous, fat sister who had deliberately sabotaged her wedding from the start. "You have no idea what you're talking about," I said, my voice cold. "Oh, I think I do," he sneered. "And let me tell you something else. Chloe mentioned you were planning on giving us a generous wedding gift. After this little performance, I think it's safe to say we won't be holding our breath. We don't need anything from you anyway." He puffed out his chest, full of drunken bravado. "We're fine without your charity." A slow, cold smile spread across my face. It was a genuine smile this time, filled with the purest, most exquisite schadenfreude I had ever felt. He had just walked directly into my trap. He had opened the one door I was praying he would open. "Charity," I repeated, my voice dangerously sweet. "Oh, Mark." It was so much more than that. I reached into my small, elegant clutch and pulled out my phone. With a few quick taps, I brought up a photo on the screen. It was a picture I had taken just before I left my apartment, a picture of the shredder on my desk, surrounded by a pile of paper confetti that was once a check. I zoomed in, making sure the details were crystal clear. My signature, the date, their names, and the amount, with its glorious line of zeros. I held the phone out for him to see. "You're right," I said, my voice ringing with triumph. "You don't need anything from me, and I've already made sure of it." Mark squinted at the phone screen, his drunken swagger deflating like a punctured balloon. The numbers seemed to swim before his eyes for a moment before they finally resolved into a coherent, horrifying figure. $20,000. His jaw went slack. The flush of anger on his face was replaced by a sickly, pale shock. He snatched the phone from my hand, holding it closer as if the proximity would change the reality of the image. He swiped, hoping for another picture, a trick. But there was nothing. Just the shredded remains of his financial fantasy. Is this a joke?" he stammered, his voice suddenly small. My mother, who had been watching the exchange with a bewildered expression, peered over his shoulder. Her gasp was sharp and audible. "Sarah, what is this?" "That," I said, plucking my phone from Mark's nerveless fingers, "was my wedding gift, the one I've been saving for over 2 years to give you, the charity you're so fine without. It was going to be for a down payment on a house to help you start your life together, but then Chloe decided my presence in her wedding party was a bigger priority than, well, that." Mark looked from the phone to my face and back again, his mind visibly struggling to process the information. The $20,000 wasn't just a number. It was a tangible solution to so many of the hushed, stressed-out conversations I knew they'd been having for months. It was freedom from their tiny rental apartment. It was the difference between a honeymoon in the Poconos and a honeymoon in Bali. And it was gone, shredded into a million pieces because my sister didn't like how my arms looked in satin. You canceled it?" he whispered, the full weight of the consequence finally landing on him. "Because of the dress?" "No, Mark," I said, my voice patient as if explaining something to a child. "I canceled it because my sister, your wife, decided that my body was an embarrassment to her. She disinvited me from being her maid of honor, a position I have held for her in my heart since we were 5, because she valued her wedding photos more than she valued her own sister. This," I gestured to my dress, to myself, "was just a consequence. The money was the real consequence. You just didn't know it until now." At that moment, as if summoned by the sheer force of her own drama, Chloe appeared. Her eyes were puffy and red from crying, but the sight of her new husband staring at me with a look of horrified awe sent a fresh wave of fury across her face. "What is going on?" she demanded, marching over to us. "Mark, why are you even talking to her?" Mark didn't answer. He just slowly turned to face her, his expression a strange cocktail of anger and utter betrayal. "The gift, Chloe," he said, his voice hollow. "Her gift. It was $20,000. Chloe froze. She stared at him, then at me, then at my mother, who looked like she was about to faint. What are you talking about?" "She shredded the check, Chloe," he finally yelled, his voice echoing in the alcove and drawing the attention of nearby guests. $20 grand, gone, because you couldn't handle her wearing a stupid dress." The color drained from Chloe's face. For the first time all night, maybe for the first time in her life, she was rendered completely speechless. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The perfect wedding, the perfect aesthetic, all of it suddenly seemed trivial in the face of such a catastrophic financial loss. Her carefully constructed world of champagne and blush had just been violently shattered by a reality she couldn't manipulate or excuse away. I looked at the three of them. My stunned sister, my aghast brother-in-law, my devastated mother, and felt nothing but a profound sense of peace. The anger had burned itself out, leaving behind a calm, quiet certainty. I had done the right thing. "Well," I said, smoothing down the front of my dress, "I believe I have overstayed my welcome. Thank you for the invitation. It has been a truly unforgettable evening." I turned and walked away, not looking back. I didn't need to. I could feel their eyes on me, their silent, fractured tableau a fitting final photograph for the wedding album. I walked through the ballroom with my head held high, the emerald silk whispering around me. A few people stared, but I didn't care. I felt free. As I reached the grand exit, my father blocked my path one last time. "Sarah, wait," he pleaded, his earlier anger gone, replaced by desperation. "We can fix this. Just talk to them." I looked at my father, the man who had always told me to be the bigger person, and I finally understood. Being the bigger person didn't mean absorbing everyone else's cruelty. It meant having the strength to walk away from it. "There's nothing to fix, Dad," I said, and my voice was gentle, not with forgiveness, but with finality. Some things, once they're broken, can't be put back together, and some things, once they're shredded, are gone for good. I walked out of the manor and into the cool night air, leaving the wreckage of Chloe's perfect wedding behind me. I didn't go straight home. I drove to a 24-hour diner, sat in a booth, and ordered a slice of apple pie. As I ate, I pulled out my phone and looked at the confirmation email for my trip to Italy. Rome, Florence, the Amalfi Coast. 2 weeks of pasta, wine, and art, all paid for by the Aesthetic Fund. My phone started buzzing, a relentless stream of calls and texts from my family. I silenced it and put it away. For years, I had bent myself into shapes that were pleasing to them, shrinking myself to fit into the little box they had built for me. But now, I was done. I was taking up space. I was wearing the green dress. I was eating the pie. And in a few weeks, I would be standing in front of the Colosseum, my face turned toward the sun, finally free. They wanted a perfect picture, and in the end, I was the only one who got it.